Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are well. Nice to have you back. We've got a very full programme today with lots to discuss. Lots been going on. Not a lot of it good. In fact, none of it really very good, but we're going to cover it anyway. Just two things I've got to say. Someone I got in touch to ask if when we put up our sign, buy me a gin, is it actually to buy me gin? No, it's just instead of a play on buy me a coffee. Although I wouldn't mind buying gin. So anyway, but that's just to put that in perspective. The money goes towards producing this programme, allowing us to take the Prism on tour, which we will be doing actually the first Saturday in May, the 3rd of May, excuse me. There is the All Under One Banner Glasgow March, which we will be attending. We will be at Glasgow Green. On the Friday night, we're actually going to be doing a Prism show with a live audience, and more on that when we finalise location and where we're going to be in the time. But if you're interested in doing that, get in touch with us. You know how to get in touch with us, the usual places, Twitter, email, whatever. Just let us know so we can get a feel for how many you would like to come to that. Okay, so without further ado, I'll be running along a thing bottom, all under one banner, trying to raise some funds as well, aren't we all, trying to keep going. But they've got a crowdfunder going between now and April to help them raise funds. They've not fundraised for 2 or 3 years, in fact longer I think, and they're needing to fill their coffers a wee bit so they can organise things to get us marching. And we need to, especially the events of this week, which have shown us once again we, the ordinary grassroots of the independence movement, are going to need to do this by ourselves. But more on that later. Let's get the troops in. Starting up there with our man in Edinburgh, it's Lloyd Quinnan.
Hi Roddy, nice to be back.
How are you? Good to be back. We missed you again.
Well, thanks for paying the ransom.
Yeah, we did, yes, we paid the ransom. We got him out, folks. It was cheap. And over there in the Côte, not in the Côte de Brig, in the Côte de Brussels, it's there's Philip. How are you? With his eye tight. What are you wearing an Italian top for?
Yeah, how you doing? Who's playing England today?
Why are you wearing it?
Come on.
Well,
Superb. No, it's like any chance I get to wear it. A great sun shining. It's a gorgeous day. Beautiful. I'm going to go for a wander. I'm going to go head south down towards Mons.
Could you
see
do
some
the show
friends
first
down
before
there.
you go for your wander, mate? And you could do your show first.
Aye. Well, maybe not all of me is going to be here. No, it's beautiful outside. Just be outside playing. Like Wayne's, remember Wayne's used to go out and play in the sunshine instead of on their computers. That's the problem.
Well, I just want to say there's someone somewhere saying rain, rain, go to Spain, because it's been here all bloody week and apparently it's going to be here for the last 4 days. I'm not happy. And up there in Clackmannan, our favourite lawyer, everyone's favourite lawyer, our Eva. How are you doing, Eva?
Hi, Roddy. Yeah, unfortunately, this was one of these weeks where you were just so desperate to see independence, and all the reasons why we should have it for Scotland and for our people were outlined several times every day this past week. We need to get a move on.
Yeah, and we'll be discussing them. And up there in the City of Discovery, it's Alan Petrie. I hope. There he is. How you doing, Alan?
We're doing great. Had a brilliant week this week. After 7 years of fighting, we've finally got Megan approved for CBD oil.
Well done.
So, fingers crossed.
Great. Well, I've used the CBD oil before for my own condition, and it made a big difference to me, huge difference. And I hope you get the same success with it. Okay, this week, just the first thing, as you all know, folks, last week we invited John Swinney or someone from the SNP to come onto the podcast to explain to us what he wanted to get a coalition together to fight this extreme right in politics. We wanted to know what he meant by the extreme right, what he wanted to do, and as fellow independence supporters, we thought it was only right he should come on to an independence podcast to tell an independence supporting viewers what he thought was the danger, who were the danger, and how he was going to fight it. He declined. We didn't even get the courtesy of a get to. Nothing. And But he decided this week, Lloyd, that instead he would go into a unionist podcast with unionist Alec Massey's Supremo. He's done Hollywood Voices. He was on there with him and Ponsonby. But he seems comfortable with British unionists. He doesn't want to face an independence audience, does he?
No, he doesn't. I would differ with you over whether or not Ponsonby and Massey is an entirely unionist show. My own relationship with Bernard Ponsonby would tell me not quite, but there's no question that the young Massey is the major cheerleader for maintaining the union in Scotland. What I find sad about it is this would appear that instead of wanting to reach an audience of, that is in the thousands, John would appear to be happy to reach an audience which is confined entirely to the political bubble and seldom reaches four figures in its reach and its audience. That in itself is sad, but I think what it does, it indicates very clearly John's level of fear of examination. Because at no time, either when he did the Hollywood Sources programme with Jeff Aberdeen and Andy McKeever, or with Bernard Ponsonby and Alex Massey, is he put under any pressure whatsoever. The coziness, the cutesiness between the chit-chat in itself is an insult to the nation. Anyone would think that if you're interviewing the leader of the Scottish National Party who's declared goal is the achievement of independence, then surely questioning would focus on that. But unfortunately, when you're talking or examining things on that, on the issue of independence with John, all you really get is a British analysis. And this is essentially the problem that we've discovered this week, is the entire leadership of the Scottish National Party is hooked entirely on a British analysis of politics as it is at this very moment, and appear to have no vision to take us away from that. In a week where it's made very, very clear that there is turmoil in the international stage, we have the First Minister of Scotland supporting entirely the Starmer approach on the international stage and the Reeves approach in terms of finance. And that means that our people are deprived of their own natural resources and their own natural wealth so that John can support the British government in their imperial plans to send soldiers to the Ukraine. This in itself is ridiculous. But one thing I would say is this, that if John were a man of true courage, then I think to come onto through a Scottish prism and explain himself, or not explain himself, inform the people of what the plan is to achieve the sovereignty of our country and ultimately our independence. That's what he should be doing, because that's what people want to hear. The people that he wants to go out and vote for his party next year in the Scottish Parliament elections. I would suggest that the campaign starts now, John. And if you want independent supporters to actually come out and support the SNP in any numbers whatsoever, then you better start explaining to them very clearly what your plans are for removing us from this toxic union and allowing the people of this country to flourish.
I hear you. And just as they've given, the Scottish Parliament has given an open invitation to a fascist dictator from a fascist regime in Ukraine, we offer an open invitation to John to come on here anytime. Whenever it suits him, we will accommodate him, and he can tell the people of Scotland what the big plan is, because they need to know that. They should know that before May 26, because we've got plans for it. And let's see what yours are. Phil, just on that topic of what Lloyd was touching on, that very much the Scottish government and the Scottish establishment have fallen in behind the Brits on everything in Ukraine. Now, this is something, a twofold question here for you. This is Rachel from Accounts on last Saturday signed a deal that would give 2.26 billion to Ukraine, and they've underwritten the loan. But the idea to pay it back apparently is they're going to use frozen Russian assets. Now, I'm no banker, I'm no international lawyer, but that poses a huge danger to the entire Western financial system, does it not? If they steal, and that's in effect what they're doing, and this isn't a protection of being pro-Putin, just the fact their money is deposited, if they take it and use it for their money to fight against them, why would other countries want to use the Western financial system thereafter?
Well, they wouldn't, and they don't have to. They have an alternative now. The Russians and the Chinese are changing moving the goalposts, and the rest of the world is noticing and joining in. The first point that was mentioned when Zelensky, this fascist dictator, invited by John Swinney to address Hollywood. Absolutely appalling. This guy came in on the false flag of bringing peace and resolution to an area where we know the Nazis go way back since the Second World War in Ukraine, and they volunteered to man the death camps, I think 100,000 or so, and this is where the Banderas come from. People need to know about this and understand it. But this Ukrainian, I think it was Newsweek. You can test remember the rumours that were going around, he was in the Panama Papers. Well, do a wee bit of research, folk. Ukrainian anti-oligarch President Vladimir Zelensky, who didn't speak Ukrainian originally, he's actually a native Russian speaker, and his inner circle network of offshore companies, but they weren't in the Panama Papers, but they can be found in the Pandora Papers, which is another tranche of files leaked by journalists that reveals clandestine financial affairs of the elite, rich and super rich. This is a huge leak of tax haven files by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, okay? It revealed the secret offshore holdings of 336 politicians from more than 90 countries, Zelensky among them. This has been this has been the most corrupt country in Europe for a long time, and this former comedian was elected Ukrainian president in April 29 to help fight corruption, to unify the country against war and influence the oligarchs of the ex-Soviet country. He rode into the presidency on a wave of public anger over the corruption of the country's political class, and he's named in the Pandora Papers knee-deep in corruption in a CIA and Western absolute player, con man, absolute shyster. Rachel from Accounts hits headlines again. Disgusting. I mean, the Metro, a free paper in London, which is of course pure propaganda like most newspapers these days, pointed out that this is a 2.6 billion loan from the UK to Ukraine. And it's just like, you look at these lines, it's lie after lie after lie. The first one comes, it could help turn the table on Vladimir Putin's war machine. Lie. Not happening. People, do some homework. Just read the alternative news, look beyond this utter garbage, and you will find the truth. The truth is out there. The money is the Metro goes on, the money is the UK's contribution, what, stolen money, to a 38.39 billion loan package agreed by the G7 group of nations, funded by frozen Russian assets. Stolen Russian assets, that should read. The money could be used, they go on and say, to fund air defence, artillery or other military equipment. What are they going to buy? Because we haven't got any left. Where are they going to buy it? You know, it takes ages, it takes years to... We're not on a war foot, we're not manufacturing 115mm shells. We're running out. It's an absolute barefaced lie. And when they say it could be used to fund air defence, etc., it won't. It will be dished out to the shysters behind this war, as all the rest of that money was. And Reeves went on to say, our support for Ukraine and her men and women in their fight for freedom from Putin's aggression is unwavering and will remain so far as long as it takes. She's a puppet idiot. She will be rewarded for this monetarily and politically, but what she really means, while there's one single man or boy willing to stand and die for Ukraine, we'll back you until you are all slaughtered, because that's the only result that's going to come out here. And this new money, and this sickens you. This is going to sicken you. This is in Britain's national interest, she said, because of the front line of our defence, the defence of our democracy, and shared values is in the Ukrainian trenches. Shared values. A safe and secure Ukraine is a safe and secure UK. Are we fascist right-wing regime right now in the UK, along with the Ukrainians? Well, it seems we are. It seems we are. I suppose we are. And what are the people of Scotland going to do about it? Independence, nothing less, as usual. Only answer.
Absolutely, Phil. But this is the thing. We know they've given over 12.9 billion, Alan, to Ukraine already since July. this next 2.2. But they come in telling us there was a 22 billion black hole, so they couldn't pay the winter fuel allowance. They couldn't raise the pension properly. They had to, they're looking at cuts because we're coming on to that. There's huge cuts they're looking at. So where's the money being found? Or are they lying to us once, twice, or thrice?
Everything that comes out of their mouth is lies. Now, even them saying that this is a loan, total lie. It's used as a loan because they think that'll be more acceptable to the British people, who are now questioning the money that is being used for this bomb, for these bombs and military assistance. Total lie. We will never ever see that money back. But I mean, Rachel is writing off loans for her friends, right, left, and centre, while we are facing major cuts. And the reason we have got massive cuts is going back, say, 25 years ago. Labour started their PFIs. We took out loans in Scotland of local authorities only of £5.6 billion worth of loans. Our repayments are £30 billion. It's estimated that the year 25-26, local councils will be spending £1.1 billion in that financial year to pay off these debts. At the same time, they're making massive cuts. Stirling and Clarks, for example, 50% of their council tax allocation is going to pay off PFI debts for that council. Dundee City Council, 9% of their education budget is being used for PFI repayments. It's ridiculous. Labour started this mess in the first place. And what are they doing? They're taking even more money off of us to go and pay for wars. We used to have a proud heritage, proud history in Scotland, putting bairns before bombs. The SNP have ripped up that policy totally. And not only are they talking about helping Ukraine in a war that shouldn't be happening, they're talking about removing the nuclear policy that the SNP was founded on, of removing nuclear weapons from our seas and our land. That policy is sacrosanct to the Yes movement and must not be changed. So let's get back to bairns, not bombs.
Yeah, we're going to come on to that. We're going to talk about that. Just a side issue, folks, while you listen, talking of Mr. Zelensky's wealth. He just recently bought the third largest bank in France. Not bad for a guy that earns 30,000 euros a week, a month or a year rather in Ukraine. He's bought a French bank for $1 billion. Work it out how he managed that. And we're trying to get more money. It's just quite scandalous. But here's the thing, I just thought that, Eva, we're talking about this loan and all the money that's going, and Rachel at Accounts is talking about cutting welfare by billions. They've lined it up. It's always the most vulnerable they're going for, and they're going to do that so that they can continue a war that is, that the President of the United States is trying to bring to an end, and they want to keep going. It's quite disgusting.
I think that what Rachel Reeves actually said was that people who receive welfare benefits are letting the rest of us down. It was words to that effect, that somehow people who were in receipt of benefits were undeserving, and that their conduct was such that it was a disappointment to the rest of society who weren't claiming benefits. I mean, it was an attitude that should have been anathema to what is supposed to be a socialist, left-leaning Labour government. We've often said, I probably say it every week, two cheeks of the same backside, but they're probably out-Torying the Tories now. And you see, this is why Scottish independence is such a precious aim, such a golden opportunity, such a goal for the people of Scotland, because we know that Scots have a more community-based approach, and we are inclined to be peaceable. We're not warmongers. And instead, what we've seen this week is those who were elected to take us towards our country's freedom, our emancipation, our self-determination, our ability to take our place on the world stage as a peace-loving, peace-promoting country has been restricted and limited by those we trusted and who've let us down. We had John Swinney this week talking in terms of issues about benefits and the budget for defence. We had Stuart MacDonald saying that the Scottish National Investment Bank should be able to lend money for the purposes of defence. That ban on money being provided by that bank for defence, he said, should be lifted. The SNP have turned into warmongers.
Can I just interrupt you, Eve? I've got a wee video here on exactly
I think John
that.
Swinney should go to Scotland House in Brussels. I think he should give a speech about organisations, institutions like the Scottish Government, sub-state governments, sub-state actors, and their role in all of this. And he should say, in no uncertain terms, I am a part of the coalition of the willing. I'm not at the front row, I'm probably not even the second row, but I am a domestic partner, along with the First Ministers of Wales. I see the First Minister of Northern Ireland has taken a different view on the Belfast deal for the missiles for Ukraine. But John Swinney should go out and position himself as that. And in fairness, he should say, look, it doesn't mean a free pass. We're still a parliamentary democracy. There will still be areas where we don't align. But I'm starting for the position where I want my government and I want to marshal legislation, policy, spending in such a direction that is helpful, that makes the Scottish Government a coalition, a part of the coalition of the willing. I think that sends a good signal domestically. I think it sends a good signal to European partners. I think in the long term, when we get to a future independence referendum, that will set us in good stead. So he's laying tramlines for the future. And then what does he actually have to do? I mean, I think one of the things I've written about in the past few weeks, the Scottish National Investment Bank has a ban on investing in companies that produce munitions. That has to go. My understanding is that doesn't even take legislation. It would just take a simple vote of the board. But I don't know if ministers could direct them, but they should. That should go. Our national institutions should support our national security. I think the First Minister, along with the Secretary of State for Scotland, along with the Defence Procurement Minister, should get together in Bute House with the members of the Scottish defence sector, and he should just say, what do you need? I want to write a Scottish defence industrial skills strategy that's all about putting in resource, policy resource and financial resource into our colleges and universities so that you can recruit enough people, in the right people who've got the right training, so that Scotland's industry is operating at peak strength as we are in this period of rearmament. I think he sheds that awkwardness that the Scottish Government has always had around this. I know there was a debate in Holyrood about this exact issue quite recently. And I think these would be strong signals, things he could actually do that would make a material difference. And I think this is probably where his instincts are at, to be honest. I think John Swinney should go to Scotland House in Brussels. I think he should give a speech about organisations, institutions like the Scottish Government, sub-state governments, sub-state actors, and their role in all of this. And he should say, in no uncertain terms, I am a part of the coalition of the willing. I'm not at the front row, I'm probably not even the second row, but I am a domestic partner, along with the First Ministers of Wales. I see the First Minister of Northern Ireland has taken a different view.
I don't know, did we have some internet problems there? That seemed to freeze my screen, I don't know. I was going to say, either that there, I should just say, is supposed to be a Scottish National Party politician. It just sounded British to me. He used phrases like Scotland as a sub-state, our national interest, our national defence, while talking about getting money into defence sector.
The kindest thing that I could say is, it is better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak and remove all doubt. That's the kindest thing that I could say about that episode. But what I'd really like to do is to hand Stuart MacDonald a gun and tell him to get his cell to the front bloody line, along with Keir Starmer and John Swinney and Ian Blackford and all the other apologists for this war. It is appalling that these people have ever had any say over the government of our country. And that interview of Stuart MacDonald is all the evidence that you need to say that you should never again vote SNP while it has the current leadership. The current leadership has got to go, because these folk cannot possibly represent our country anywhere, let alone on the world stage. That attitude about bombs, not bairns, has no place in the Scottish psyche. It has no place in Scottish life. You know, we've got people in Scotland today that are sitting shivering in their houses, that have to choose between eating and heating. Again, we say this every week. We've got mothers that can't put school shoes on their bairns' feet. We've got pensioners that are scared at home alone because they haven't got a home carer because there aren't enough carers. We've got pensioners sitting in hospitals who should be in care homes, but we don't have enough care homes and we don't have the staff to run them. We've got people that desperately need legal aid, for example, and the government spent money on their own legal expenses rather than making access to justice available for citizens who deserve the right to a fair trial. The Scottish Government spent in the course of the past year £10 million on external legal advice defending themselves, refusing to put that £10 million into the legal aid budget to enable citizens to be legally represented. Scotland is in chaos as the result of the SNP government and their mismanagement of innumerable public services and public bodies. And the attitude displayed by Stuart MacDonald simply confirms that British spirit lies at the foundation of everything that the current leadership of the SNP allow to happen to Scotland. We need fighters. We need people who will stand up and say, Scotland is a nation. We should be a nation state. We require our independence for the prosperity, for the health, for the very lives of our people. What we do not need is to be represented by fools such as these.
Absolutely. Lloyd, when we all joined the national movement and the SNP back in the day, when everything in television was in black and white in my case, but that's another story. But one of the things that encouraged me in, and I know others the same, was that we were a party of neutrality, a party that opposed all wars, a party that opposed weapons of mass destruction, a party that opposed British imperialism and French and American and any other kind of imperialism. Those were the main tenets of the company, of the party and of the movement. And you listen to that bam in that video talking about sub-state actors and, you know, being good little Brits. I was nauseated and I'm raging about it. How about you?
I'm very, 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 very angry. But then again, every time I hear Stuart MacDonald's name, never mind actually hear him say something, it usually makes me angry. No, the complete rejection of the historic nature of the SNP and its basis, its philosophical and moral basis that creates the space for itself in politics, was predicated on the concept that we did not want to be mini Britain when we became independent. That we understood our past history, which was a history of resistance to invasion. We as a country throughout our independence, in the years of independence, set out to conquer no one, nowhere, ever. Everything that we did that gave us this martial reputation was in protection of our own land, to stop it being burned, pillaged, plundered, and the people murdered. That's what our martial history is. It is not the British martial history that Stuart MacDonald clearly admires so much. But what's really appalling is when you think of all the people we've known over the years who were members of the party, who were, you know, membership of the Scottish National Party, membership of the Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, normally went fairly hand in hand. I mean, I myself have been arrested a number of times at Faslane in the demonstrations against the weapons of mass destruction. And on many, many occasions, I was accompanied into the back of the Black Maria by either Willie Wolfe, the former president of the party and leader of the party from West Lothian, or indeed Canon Kenyon Wright, who was a member of the Campaign for the Scottish Assembly and created the original Scottish Convention that led to our devolved Parliament. Two men of very differing views in many things, but one a senior churchman, another one a senior politician, and indeed a well-respected accountant. They're just two of many who are no longer with us, who supported entirely Scotland's position as an independent country with neutrality. I mean, because I take an interest in everything that happens in the Isles that are called Britain. This week in Ireland, there has been a quite extraordinary scenes in the Dáil, because there's an attempt by the current coalition government to remove the triple lock, which maintains Ireland's neutrality, and as Ireland has been a neutral country since its independence. And this has created a huge discussion about what does Ireland mean to the Irish, and we should be having the same debate about what does Scotland mean to the Scots, because what the Irish are talking about at the moment is the morality of politics. Their reason for their neutrality is they understand that neutrality gives you a power in the world, a soft power that none of the armed and belligerent nations have. You can sneak under the doors and help smooth over difficult situations in ways that the armed countries cannot do. Those that are aligned have stated their position. Those that are non-aligned and neutral are exactly that. They are and can be the honest brokers. And it's always been my belief and my desire since the day and hour I joined the Scottish National Party and the independence movement was that would be Scotland's position in the world. That position was the position of armed neutrality along the same lines as the Irish, to be entirely non-aligned with certainly any of the military alliances, and possibly the political and economic alliances as well, for one reason: it gave us an ability to exercise our moral values on and in the world. If we assume exactly the same moral imperatives as the British government, which is that might is right and that bombs solve situations, then we are not an independent Scotland. We will be an independent England Mark II. Now, I know there's many in the unionist establishment in Scotland who believe that, but what's horrified me completely this week is to discover what I primarily did know already, that the leaders of the Scottish National Party at the moment have exactly that mindset. They're little Brits in their head. They cannot visualise the world except through British tinted glasses. And as a result, they will never, ever be able to lead us to true independence. Because if their independence is under the umbrella of NATO, that has now been shown to be a warmongering organisation, if their independent Scotland has boots on the ground in Ukraine, if their independent Scotland still has the weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, and indeed is part of any alliance that's prepared to use those weapons, then we will not be independent. We might as well be the 51st state, or we might as well declare ourselves as Scotlandshire, not unlike Yorkshire. But until this current leadership of the Scottish National Party develops an actual vision of where we want to be, then we're going nowhere. And how they are incapable of doing that is beyond my understanding. What greater thing could you imagine than the ability to rebuild your country in the world, to rebuild your country and create a path where your people has a clear future that is Scottish, not British? That, to me, is the most exciting possibility in the world. The other thing is, on a personal basis, how could John Swinney not believe that it would be the greatest day of his life to stand in the UN Plaza in New York and pull the lanyard on the flag that separates the flags of Senegal and Saudi Arabia and announces Scotland's independence and our re-entry into the world? Who would not want to do that? What is he in politics for, other than administering the British state and suggesting that we send our young men and women to go and defend a country that cannot win the conflict that it is in? It's absurd. It's absurd. And it's deeply, deeply depressing.
Indeed, it's Phil, on that, but the other one, I just want to put this in as part of it. You know, I should put up the boots on the ground that Trump, that Stammer wants, but also here's what Stephen Flynn had to say. He wants the UK government to hike taxes to fund a splurge in defence spending. I reiterate again, ladies and gentlemen, this is meant to be a Scottish National Party Member of Parliament talking up British foreign policy and British defence in a British part of a British proxy war. What are these people all about, Phil?
Well, they're not about the people of Scotland. So, Stephen, you don't represent the will of the people of Scotland, so bugger off. Git. Yeah, that you're sold out. You're part of it hurts because he was so good. He was a good counsellor. He was great in the 2014 campaign. But and he's a good orator. He's a smart guy. But you're betraying. You're part of the problem, not the solution, Stephen. And you need to go. And I drive you crazy. Someone also wants Trump to cancel his visit so he can stop the war and rejoin the European warmongers and Russophobic people. I mean, the Americans are pulling out of Europe. Maybe not in its entirety, but substantially, and it's about time. The EU needs to stand up on its own 2 feet and defend itself, but Scotland needs to come out of that. We should have a European army, and we should defend, not oppress and attack. I've recounted a few times when I was part of the delegation to the US mission to NATO and the SHAPE, Supreme Headquarters Allied Powers Europe in Mons, to talk about an independent Scotland's position on NATO membership and critically funding the 2% GD commitment that all members of NATO have. But if you don't stop talking to enemies or allies, and the US, as Kissinger famously said, may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal, then you've got to have the dialogue. You've got to have that dialogue. But Stuart McDonald, that enraged me. He's not a Scottish politician. He's a director of Regent Park Strategies, a company registered number 826540. Note there's no S in front of that, as a Scottish registered company would have. So it's probably based in London. And he talks as if he's based in London. And he talks to his clients who are based in London. And he talks to the warmongers down there. You go on their website, the About tab says, meet Stuart. And I'll quote, Stuart's the founding director of Regent Park Strategy and lives in Glasgow. After almost a decade as a senior frontline politician serving as an MP in the UK Parliament, Stuart founded the company in 2024, aims to use his skills, unique insight and experience to help his clients navigate today's increasingly complex world and achieve success. Well, hi. I mean, Jesus God, it's just utter bollocks. And Stuart can bugger off, and yes, give him a gun, send him with Swinney to the front lines in Ukraine and see how scared the Russians get. This disgusted, sickened and enraged me. I used to like this guy, but he's been completely turned and is not representative of the Scottish people. He is for sale, he has sold out and should never be allowed to represent any Scottish Independence Party. Once SNP get cleansed, he's one that must be booted out. That disgusted me, Stuart. To hell with you.
Absolutely. But over and above that, it was a heck of a week for the SNP becoming belligerent Brits, Alan. Here was another one. Swinney. And talk, he wants to see Scottish soldiers. He wants to see your sons and grandsons dying for a regime in Ukraine, folks, are not even in the EU, are not in NATO, who are the most corrupt country in the world. We've talked about little Zelensky, who's been given an open invitation to our parliament. He just bought a French bank, for God's sake, the third biggest. And we're funding that, but he wants our boys to go and die in that war. How disgusted are you, Alan?
Very disgusted. And like even everybody else has said, you go first. You want our troops in there, you go first. See how safe it is first. But this shows the lie that they've been telling, that the money they want to spend is for defence. You don't defend yourself by going into another country and blowing up Bairns and killing innocent women and children. You defend yourself by securing your own borders. That's how you do it. This is just total and utter nonsense from the SNP and the rest of these politicians. And let's remember, who was the last country to invade Scotland? Many unionists will claim it was the Germans. No, it wasn't. Germans attacked us, but thanks to our Polish and Czechoslovakian pilots, they didn't win, so they were never able to invade. The last country to invade Scotland was England. The very people John Swinney and the SNP are bowing the knee to. That's just a fact, and it's got to stop. But this war is also a deflection, because although we all believe in neutrality and don't believe in wars, there is one war I am prepared to stand on the front line for, and that is the war that Westminster is putting on the working class, the poorest and the most vulnerable in our society with their cuts. Because they're trying to hide the cuts by deflecting everyone over to these wars. They're cutting about £5 billion from disability allowances, while they are funding these wars by billions of pounds. This is a real war in our country, a war against the working people and the poor and the disabled. It's time we started a new suffrage movement. We've got to go back to basics and start winning back our rights, telling these politicians they work for us. We are no longer prepared to accept this. We must fight every single one of them, including the trade union movement, who are no longer protecting their members. They are protecting the politicians. So I would say to every worker, challenge your union. If you can't change it, remove the funding, at least from the political levy. Stop funding our enemies. It's time to stand up and take back our nation, because the biggest war in this country is from Westminster against us. And there will be some of the unionists probably on the comments right this moment writing, Angry Petrie, damn right I am.
Quite right. But here's the other thing, Eva. This thing that, excuse me, John Squinney wants to send Scottish boys to Ukraine. Starmer, when questioned on his policy, has said that he won't even guarantee a vote by the Houses of Parliament. He will make the decision. So there won't even be democratic oversight over possibly Scots boys going to die in a foreign war.
We're probably dancing around this a bit, actually, because the reality will be that British troops are already there and they'll have been there for a while. We're just not being told about it. What we need to have is a war on poverty and a war on want. And see my strapline, women won't wheesht. This week, women and their supporters from Clydebank Women's Aid had to have a demonstration at the council offices because the money for the Women's Aid Refuge was in jeopardy. It looked like the Labour-controlled local authority wasn't going to give them their grant. And obviously, Women's Aid refuges are for women fleeing domestic abuse, domestic violence, and for their children. And Women's Aid provides a service that is absolutely vital. It is life-saving, it is life-enhancing, and its budget should never have been in question at any time, but it was. The next bit of my strapline is Save Grangemouth. The amount of money that's firing into Ukraine and other, war zones is such that Grangemouth could be saved 1,000 times over. The Women's Aid refuges could be saved and fully funded. The health service could be enhanced and improved. Education, we could buy a lot more teachers. We can, the list is absolutely endless. And instead, what we've got, as Alan says, is an absolute complete distraction from everything that's happening at home so that we can focus on being, the big boys abroad. Billy Big Boss jumping about with the Americans or with the Europeans and pretending that somehow Britain remains an imperial power with influence in the world. Well, Britain's imperial power in the past was a malign influence. It was not a positive influence. Just ask the people at India about that, for example. There are innumerable examples of British brutality abroad, British theft, British plunder. It was not progress to be invaded by the Brits. It was a death sentence. And this is where we are again, where British rulers, British leaders, thinking that they are not even accountable to the people who elected them. That's a Labour government. Labour, the people who were the founding fathers too of the CND, or pacifists, or those people a long time ago who were conscientious objectors. I live round the corner from where my dad was born and brought up. If he was alive today, he'd be 90 years old last month. His dad was a soldier in the First World War, so were his brothers. One of them didn't come home. Another one was gassed and lived a horrible life thereafter. There are no circumstances in which my grandfather ever envisaged that I, his granddaughter, would be considering whether or not my son, at the age of 21, was going to be sent to the front without even a vote in the House of Commons about it. That on its own justifies Scottish independence every day of the week. And it is why we must regalvanise ourselves, create unity within our movement, and take our country to the peace that our people want and our people deserve, because the alternative does not bear thinking about. When I go to my limb clinic, I meet people who are veterans, who lost their legs and lost their arms, being blown up by IEDs in Afghanistan, Iraq and elsewhere. I don't want to go back there and see young laddies for Clackmannanshire or Dundee or Edinburgh or Coatbridge who've had their legs and their arms blown off over in Ukraine or elsewhere. It is completely and utterly wrong, and it is not what the people of Scotland support, and I'm pretty damn sure it's not what the people of the United Kingdom support either, and that's why he'll not have a vote, because he knows he would lose it.
Absolutely they would. Well, I don't know if they would lose the vote. They wouldn't have a vote with the people, but they wouldn't in the Parliament. They probably all do it because they can get into the bunkers. Last week we discussed on the pressure coming from the UK for us to take nuclear power stations that we don't require, Lloyd. But this week, a couple of things. One, Starmer. The wording in this is quite important. Starmer tells, doesn't ask, doesn't request, implore or beg, tells the SNP to ditch its opposition to nuclear weapons. And then lo and behold, the very next day in the Times, Lloyd, we blah blah Blackford, who wants to be a Lord, who thinks we should change our mind about the House of Lords, he's talking up nuclear weapons, we should change the position and go to the position of multilateralists instead of unilateralists. Again, betrayal of the very foundations of our movement from both of them.
Yes, absolutely. But I think Keir Starmer's done his homework and he knows that John is very, very soft on this issue. In fact, generally speaking, John Swinney is very soft on all military adventures. I mean, my own experience when I was a member of the parliamentary group under John's leadership, when the Iraq war started, John made it very clear to everyone that he would not be vocal, despite the fact that it was party policy that we were against the war, that he would not be vocal in his condemnation of the war. And indeed, of the many rallies, public meetings, gatherings that there were during that 18 months, John never appeared or spoke at any of those rallies. In fact, I think it was primarily myself and Margot MacDonald who led the charge for the SNP group in the Parliament. John has a liking for camouflage, and cordite is the way I would describe it. His approach is to accept that in times, or which is a very, very old-fashioned approach, is in times of war you have to get behind our boys, irrespective of what that war is, how it's being carried out, and who's being massacred. That's just the way he approaches it. When in actual fact, if you're the leader of the Scottish National Party, immediately the British start talking about spending money on this, that or the other, then you should be demanding the right to sit at the table and negotiate whether or not the people of Scotland actually want that money to be spent. And if he did that, he would not be able to look Starmer in the face when Starmer tells him to get rid of nuclear, to keep the nuclear weapons. John would be forced in those circumstances to say to him no, because that's not the will of the people. But John doesn't represent the will of the people. John represents the will of a very, very small cabal at the top of the Scottish National Party. And protection of the Scottish National Party is John's primary function, not the achievement of independence and not the protection and development of the life chances of the people of this country. Now, if John was to properly address the argument against nuclear weapons in Scotland, it would cut to the heart of many things that he believes in. It would shake to the foundation some of his moral imperatives. But the fact of the matter is, John works for us, as they all do. And if the majority of the people of this country believe that the waste on Trident, the waste on, before that, Polaris, is correct, then you need to at least mirror that in some ways. So what he should have said when Starmer suggested to him to get rid of the nuclear weapons, he should have said, I'm sorry, that's not possible, Mr. Starmer, because the people of my country don't want to die in a nuclear holocaust that could be caused by accident or by a nuclear strike. And as for the humble crofter from Clermiston or Skye via Clermiston via Deutsche Bank, this is a man who will say absolutely anything to achieve his next aim. And Ian built his life as a set of tick boxes, get out of school, get a good job, get into politics, have power, have 2, 3, maybe 4 wives, And now he wants, this is his next bid for the House of Lords. This is, Ian thinks he can piggyback because, as long as Stuart MacDonald is allowed to make the statements that he is and is not slapped down by the current defence spokesperson of the party, who I believe is Brendan O'Hara, then Blackford can say whatever the hell he likes as well. And John will let him say it. Because when it comes down to it, the way the central part of the top of the SNP is at the moment, they all want to go to the House of Lords because that's their natural right. That's what follows on when you do British politics. You do Parliament, you do the green benches, and then you do the red benches. All of them have abandoned entirely the central beliefs of the people of this country, which is nuclear weapons are bad because they kill indiscriminately, they are illegal because they kill indiscriminately, and they should not be on our shores, and we should not be a target for British imperialism, for the results of British imperialism. Because, make no mistake, anybody, if there is a nuclear war, the first strike on the UK is central London and Faslane. That's just a reality. The Russians have told us this. Now, this is not a game. This is it makes me think, because John got away with his strategy when the party was opposed to the Iraq War in 2001, 2, 3, and he didn't really come out and say very much about it, and he got away with that. Does he think he can get away with it this time again and carry on supporting this war in the Ukraine despite its possible effects, which could be a nuclear exchange? The possibility of that has increased now because of what Macron said this week about extending the uniquely French nuclear deterrent that only will be used if France gets attacked, will now be extended to Europe. We'll get closer and closer to that nuclear midnight. And again, and I keep saying this, too many people in this country think that nuclear war is survivable. It is not. No matter what they tell you, there is no such thing as a limited nuclear exchange, because the conundrum that faced Oppenheimer and others of whether or not the chain reaction will happen, and it still is a possibility, it's a mathematical possibility, that has not been resolved. And every time any nuclear fission or fission occurs, the potential for that chain reaction exists. And anybody who thinks they can play with nature, it can play with existence in itself. For politics, they're mad. They're absolutely mad. And they've not done their homework. And that's the biggest problem we've got in Scotland. We have politicians who don't do their homework.
Here. Phil, you like myself, like everyone on this show, you were encouraged by as a peacenik and a neutralist and against weapons of mass destruction. How did this, when you see this, we're being softened up. We've been in the politics game long enough to know this Starmer saying it and then blah, black for putting a column in the Times the next day, all planned. This is then softening up for the SNP changing direction. This is on.
Sadly, it is, and it's just more of the same. They're turncoats. They no longer represent the people of Scotland. I mean, this is bear in mind, this is the SNP's former leader at Westminster suggesting the party should ditch its long-standing, I keep forgetting, I'm no longer a member, long-standing policy of unilateral nuclear disarmament. Then, if that's what he's suggesting, then I suggest that people need to ditch Ian Blackford. Simple as that. The Scotland and the Scottish people will. We will. He said he'd always held the view that the Trident nuclear deterrent should be removed from the Clyde. But then he questioned the roadmap to this and added, when facts change, careful consideration of our response is appropriate. He's just paraphrasing Jonathan Swift, I think. When the situation changes, so does my opinion. What about you, sir? But it's horseshit, because he's gradually moving over to a complete 180-degree turn, and he's just done it. So the SNP has long argued for the removal of nuclear weapons from Scottish territory. That's not that's not up for debate, Ian. You don't get to do that. You don't get to decide that. You can have your opinion, but you do not represent the Scottish people when you talk about such things. We want rid of this. We will get rid of this. We will remove it when we get independence. And the party has said it's never, and will never support retention of renewal of Trident. Well, is that going to be erased like Alex Salmond's part in the creation of SNP? Well, probably, because that's what they do, these absolute shysters. Swinney defended this position despite an increased volatile global situation, and this is a critique coming from the mainstay. But of course, in the Times, Ian, again, from 2017 to 2022, he was the leader. He said, there must now be a concentration of minds on a multilateral approach. Never again should Lord Blackford of Comfycroft, MacDonald, Flynn, Swinney, Sturgeon and the like, they've all sold us out. Don't listen to these people. Cleanse them, get rid of them, remove them from politics and let them go, eat grass with the donkeys in the donkey retirement home or whatever, because they're clowns. They're marching the people away from independence and into wars for personal gain. That is disgusting. And it ties back, and here's the irony here. They think they're being canny. They think they're playing the system. They're only doing it for themselves. Just the whole boots on the ground stuff we talked about earlier. The Daily Express absolutely nailed it. Right, this was Daily, I think it was. This is the headline. Glorified Mayor John Swinney told Scotland doesn't have its own military after his Ukraine pledge. He's right, John. You're a clown. You've got no authority. You're a council leader. You're a glorified mayor. And he was told this. But, he was telling, this was BBC Martin Geisler, there could be Scottish boots on the ground by the end of the year. He's got no say whatsoever over the deployment of UK's armed forces. You're a clown, John. And just go, somebody buy him a red-nosed big giant shoes and just give him another job. Get him out of this one. It just enrages you. How can you be so stupid? And they're laughing at you. They're laughing at you, John. They're laughing at us because you think you're playing them. And you're just a fool. We need rid of these guys. I'm sick of having to talk about these clowns and the mistakes. And do you know the other thing is, he should stand down and get out of politics along with the rest of those who have betrayed us and allow genuine independence-minded folks to unify the movement, get us independence, then we can have a genuine peacekeeping force. We again would do well to consider turning one of these daft aircraft carriers into a hospital ship and park it off Gaza. Although the smart move, if the smart move works and Israel is moved to the Arizona desert, then the majority of Middle Eastern problems would disappear, along with the requirement for us to park our big hospital ship off the coast of Gaza. So the world's gone bonkers, and we don't need clowns like this dragging us along with the madness that currently prevails in the dying world order that we currently face. It's a disgrace.
It is. Alan, if they do try and get rid of the unilateralism and start deciding they like Trident and they like British soldiers fighting wars and whatnot, is that the final pillar of what we knew as the National Party gone?
If they do that, then there is no justification at all for anyone who supports Scottish independence to support the SNP, because they will be a fully British party. Now, this nonsense where they're saying that we need it for defensive purposes. Nonsense. Do they not understand how nuclear weapons work? As soon as, let's take NATO, for example, Article 5, which states any member of NATO who is attacked, every other member will come in to defend. That works the other way around as well. That any NATO member who attacks a non-member of NATO can see every single member of NATO as being the enemy, which means one member of NATO sets off a nuclear bomb, the rest of them set off a nuclear bomb. Our little bombs going up in the air is chicken feed. The world is gone, regardless of if we send up a nuclear bomb or not. The world is gone. Only takes America and Russia to set off the nuclear bombs, and the rest of us are gone. So having it on our soil is irrelevant. We shouldn't have it. We shouldn't be a target for it. And we shouldn't be risking the dangers of it just being there. Because let's face it, it's not just them being set off, it's the dangers of them being there. And if they also were for defensive, are you telling us lies that Israel have been attacked by all these small countries with very little defence forces? And when militias are attacking Israel according to the West. They've got nuclear weapons. Why is it not saving them? Why is it not stopping people from attacking them? Total and utter nonsense. And the SNP, one warning to you. Do not go down the road of nuclear weapons, because if you do, you're out, and you'll be out forever.
Correct. Well, the weapons of mass destruction didn't stop the IRA defeating the British Army, or the Afghanis defeating the British Army, or the Iraqis defeating the British Army, or the Yemenis defeating the Royal Navy and the British. The weapons of mass destruction didn't work. Eva, weapons of mass destruction, if the SNP moved to the British position of actually supporting them, would that shatter your illusions that the party can be saved?
It would if they weren't already shattered. You know, part of my work is sometimes I do child welfare reports. So you're reporting on families that are in difficult circumstances, or I'll be at children's panels reading reports that other people have written. And the state of Scotland today is not good for very many families. Far too many families actually are living in abject poverty. I visit houses that have floors that are not carpeted. I know mothers that don't have a cooker. I know fathers that don't get to see their children because they can't afford the cost of the contact centre, but they're just marginally above the legal aid eligibility limits. Every single day of my life at work, I meet people who are addicted to alcohol or drugs, and the support services to help them to become rehabilitated are simply not there. And for some of these people, that's a generational issue. Some of them have been in care as children. That's the reason why they've become addicted, or it's a big contributory factor. Some of them have been homeless. Very many of them, in fact, most of them, have been the victims of childhood abuse of all different sorts. And none of these ills have any place in a modern, democratic, peace-loving society. And I say peace-loving deliberately because there's actually quite a lot of addicts that I know who are veterans, and it's post-traumatic stress disorder arising from combat experiences that have caused or contributed to their PTSD. These are all the problems that Scotland has as a dependent country. As one who is an adjunct to Westminster. We're North Britain. We're not allowed to stand on our own 2 feet because they don't want us to, because Westminster needs us for our resources. And although we speak every week about the resources comprising our oil or our gas, our whiskey, our fish, our forestry, our tourism industries, when it really gets down to what matters, what really counts in the world, what counts in life, what makes a difference. Right now, they want us. Westminster wants us. Keir Starmer wants the Scots for our human resources, for our soldiers, our men and women that they can put at the front line, and they've been doing it for centuries. Remember, no great mischief if they fall. You put the Highlanders in the front line because they charge and they're fearsome. That's where we are again today. And if the SNP maintain their position of apparently supporting aid to Ukraine, supporting boots on the ground in Ukraine, supporting the maintenance of weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, then the SNP will deserve the term that I rarely use against them, and that is murderous traitors, because that's all that comes of being a warmongerer or a fan of the most horrific weapon ever known to man. The worst thing that could ever have been invented, that will lead to the annihilation of life as we know it, and probably, as Lloyd has said, the end of the planet.
It is quite worrying. What's also worrying is that the clock's beating us as always, folks. But there's a couple of things I want to really just squeeze in at the end. You know, we're talking about, I mean, I'm a Democrat above all else, Lloyd, and it's democracy. The West is losing democracy, and 2 things this week happened that make you realise how bad it is. Now, there was a move by Ursula von der Leyen to get 800 billion to increase the defence to fight Russia. Mental. And also to send immediate aid to Ukraine, which, using the democratic rights, Hungary voted against. They vetoed it. They used their veto. So in true EU fashion, as they try to get rid of the president of Romania, the MAP called to strip Hungary of their voting rights because Orban wants peace. Take away their voting rights because they want peace, Lloyd. Have you ever heard anything so ridiculous in your life?
Oh, I mean, we're hearing particularly from van der Leyen and Rutte, we hear the most ridiculous things on a regular basis. But, you know, I think that maybe there's a silver lining to this hideous cloud that is the European Union, is that maybe people here are maybe waking up now to what the European Union has become, and maybe this independence in Europe bollocks will finally be confined to the dustbin of history, and people will examine properly the benefits that come from being in the European free trade area. To be honest with you, the interference in Romania, the treatment of Hungary and the treatment of Slovakia by this current commission, this unelected commission of the European Union, just really does give the lie to the fact that there's some form of European democracy. Their interference in the commission, I mean, and von der Leyen particularly, her interference in the elections right across Europe. She always states a preference. She does interfere on a regular basis. And this is someone who's not elected at all, but who is behaving currently like she is the president of a unified Europe. And that in itself is quite a frightening concept, because it's let loose all sorts of strange ideas. In some ways, what van der Leyen is doing by using and manipulating the democratic processes of the European Union is she's effectively saying that if you cross us, we will slap you down. Now, this is not new in the European Union. The Irish had to rerun their referendum on the, what was it called? Not the Lisbon Protocols, but a report from long time.
The Maastricht Treaty, was it not?
Maastricht Treaty, exactly, sorry. Early onset Alzheimer's over in Edinburgh. The Maastricht Treaty. Twice they had to vote on it because Europeans weren't prepared to accept it. And they went along with that. And people said at that time that this would be the wedge. This would be the first step on a slippery slope. And I think that's clearly where we're at now. But again, back to one of the things McDonald said is our European partners. Starmer's been saying this as well. Our European partners. What partnership is this they're talking about? You left the European Union because you want to look after your own borders, but now everybody wants to be in this European club that's going to send soldiers to the Ukraine. What form does this take? I heard a Labour member yesterday saying that that this will be the first step to a European army. Everybody was entirely opposed to a European army just a little while ago. What has changed? Genuinely, what has changed? The ex-head of the Department of Public Prosecutions is now the Prime Minister of Britain, and therefore all of that. The problem here is these people don't know what happened yesterday. And if they do know what happened yesterday, they consider it the past. They don't understand its history, and history can be learned from. Indeed, the most important thing history gives us is the ability to learn and examine where we are in this particular day, because something similar has happened not that far long ago. If you don't understand history, you make these mistakes. If you don't understand history, and clearly the Europeans don't understand history, when it comes to fighting with Russia, nobody yet has won. And I think that's the real lesson here. Now, I'm no military expert, but I read a bit of history, and I have yet to find the successful invasion and conquest of Russia. It's never happened, it's never going to happen, and the sooner everybody gets round the table and stops the massacre of all these young men, both Russian and Ukrainian, the better. But I think von der Leyen and the European Union are not the people to do that.
No, I agree. That last thing for you, Phil. One of the great things that was of the last century was the Geneva Convention, where was the proper treatment of prisoners of war, the proper treatment of countries who break the law, the international law. There was a Geneva Convention. That's what we used at Nuremberg for our morality before we started executing Nazis. We had law on our side, and it was the right. Within a week of the Russian special military operation in Ukraine, Russia were out of the UEFA, out of FIFA, from Switzerland. It came from UEFA. They were out of World Sports, Olympics. They were, there was a warrant for Putin's arrest. The biggest lack of democracy I've seen today this week was this, from Geneva, that the UN Geneva Convention office in Switzerland has declined to make an inquiry into Israel or bring Israel before them to question their war crimes in Gaza. They're just ignoring it. This is appalling. Guilty or innocent, I hasten to add, it's appalling.
Yeah, to not even look into something as evil as we know, we can see it as plain as the day that Israel is committing genocide. The state of Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people, and there's enough brave people. Craig Murray's out there doing sterling work. He's doing great work out there, and putting himself in the front line, as many have, and many have died trying to get the truth out. And for this supposed institution that supposedly represents the people and civilization to deny even the opportunity to investigate something as darkly evil as this. This is a genocide. This is a Holocaust that's happening today. And to have the very institution that was set up to oppose such things ever happening again deny even the possibility of investigating it to expose it is sick. It shows us how deeply and badly our institutions have been corrupted. They no longer represent the will of the people. The people of Europe don't want a genocide in Israel. The people of Europe don't want a war against Russia. The people of Europe want peace. We want to look after our own. We want a fairer and better civilized society. And to have these institutions betray us this way, and we can see it firsthand. We can see it firsthand in our own country with the SNP, how they have turned against us for their own benefit. It's absolutely disgusting. I mean, the Irish and Viktor Orban in Hungary are the few people that are speaking the truth about what's going on in this world. And the peacemakers are being denied a voice. The peacemakers are being denied a democratic voice to speak. I mean, God, we would give that to the devil, as was famously recounted in A Man for All Seasons, for good principled reasons. Why the hell shouldn't we let the angels speak? Sickens me. The world's gone. It's gone to hell, and we need to do something about it. And it starts by putting your own house in order. Scotland, independence, nothing less. First step, a long journey back to civilization.
I agree. And up to now, I've never said this, but I'm saying it now. The SNP cannot be supported anymore. They're not the party we thought they were. They're British. They're now Labour Party with a kilt on. That's it. That's just the way they've gone. They just remind me of Donald Duer's Labour Party, falling into the British way. God forgive them. Ladies and gentlemen, the clock's beating us. We're well over time. Till we see you again, you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.